All right, Jeff, I'll say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of, hold on 1 second, why is not going? Okay. For the month of Elul, Abba Lina Tova Baruch Meir Rena Dubin for dedicating all of Shmuel and Shira Artman this month in honor of our children and all of the Suburban sons and daughters beginning their year of study in Eretz Yisroel. May their Torah study and mitzvos in the Holy Land merit the release of our precious hostages, the success of our soldiers, and the return to their families, and the arrival of Moshiach, tzidkeuni, bimheira, biyameinu. We also thank Rabbi Shmuel and Shira Artman for dedicating a week of learning and appreciation for all of those who are expressing their support and outpouring of love towards links. There's a beautiful and meaningful fundraiser in Eretz Hashem this coming Tuesday night. You can see Rabbi Shmuel Artman, Rabbi Zavi Daniel, tomorrow night in Eretz Hashem. Incredible organization that does beautiful work for children who have lost a parent. Provide them, blanket them with love and support. And Baruch Hashem, I'm sure will be a meaningful evening, and hopefully again an organization that is clearly deserving of our incredible support. As always, thank the Artmans for their sponsorship. So with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. Incredible daf. Today's daf is Tzadik 90. We are picking up on Pei Tes Amud Beis 89b, and we left off. Let's actually pick up at Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. We actually got a few lines later, but it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 lines up from the bottom. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Asra li Adam sheyish shamida chasera o yisera b'soch beisam. So remember, again, we've spent this entire daf focusing on the idea of correct weights and measures, and the obligation that we have to go ahead and make sure that the weights and measures that we are using are of correct calibration and cannot chas v'sholom be used to in any way cheat someone. And again, that's putting anyone at a disadvantage. That's putting the seller at a disadvantage, the buyer at a disadvantage. So now comes along Rabbi Yehuda and says the name of Rav, and says something amazing. Not only is it prohibited to actually use these weights, but it is actually prohibited to even maintain them inside of your home. You're not even allowed to possess them. You can't possess them. The Gemara says, afilu hi avid shamim raglayim. Now, literally translated, even if you're using it as a bedpan. In other words, that I might have thought that, look, if I'm using it in such a degrading way, then clearly I'm not going to come to ever go ahead and use it in any type of functional fashion, and therefore it shouldn't be a problem. Comes Rabbi who descends in the name of Rav, that Allah Chalamaisi, you can't maintain inappropriate weights and measures in your home, even if you're using it in some type of degrading way. You're just not allowed to possess it. You're not allowed to have it. Amr Papa, look for so now a couple of qualifications. So Papa says like this: this is only true in a place where they don't have officials who kind of put like a seal on weights and measures. In other words, you had I don't know if there's any equivalent of this today, but the same way like you have like a health department. Right, so the health department comes along and puts a certificate that says, this kitchen satisfies certain criteria. So, I'm sorry? Gas pumps. Okay, good. So you have this idea. So I don't know. Do shops have this for weights and measures? Is there such a concept like this, like scales? Yeah. Testing, calibrate. Good. So the Gemara says, if you live in a place where the government monitors these things, right? So therefore, again, you walk into a shop and you're going to want to see, is the sticker, is the tuda, is the tuda over there that says that there's the stempel, right? That it's appropriate. So then we're not concerned. So in other words, remember, this is just to follow the progression over here. Rabbi Yehuda is saying in the name of Rav, you cannot possess inappropriate weights and measures. You can't possess them. You shouldn't have them. Even if you're using it mamish as a bedpan, you still can't have it. We're afraid you're going to use it. Come along, Rav Papa says, the truth is, we're only afraid we're going to use it if you live in a place where there is no, we'll call it governmental standard. But if you live in a place where there's a governmental standard, so anyway, the government is certifying all the weights and measures, we're not concerned because you're not going to come to use it anyway, because you're not going to get the proper certification for such use. Because if you live in a place where the government gives its stempel, right, the government gives its seal on these things, then when someone comes into the store, if they don't see the sticker, then they're not going to go ahead and use the weights and measures. Ava mahandisi leslanba. So furthermore, again, look at the Rashbam mahandisi. Holchin ubaim memonim shalmelech livdok es hamidos kimo zimnin de mahandisi. This is very interesting. So the Gemara now says as follows. And even in a place where they don't put the certification, right? They don't put the sticker. Ultimately, again, the Gemara says, we're only concerned in a place where they don't have officers making spot checks. Right, but if there are officers making spot checks, we're not concerned either. So again, so the Gemara says essentially, the Gemara seems to qualify the same as Rav in the name of Rav, that we're only concerned about maintaining inappropriate weights and measures when there's no other system of follow-up. But if there's some other system of follow-up, whether again it's the stempel, it's the certification, or it's the spot check of the government officials, then we're not so concerned if you keep them in your house, because you're not going to come to use it because there's a system. It's only if these systems are not in place that we're concerned that if you maintain it, you may come to use it. First Gemara says, the truth is, velohi. In all of these situations, we actually say still, even if there are stickers, right, even if there's certification, there's the tuda, or even if there are government officials who come in and spot check, so we're still concerned for the following situation. Zimnin de mikri ben hashmashos or mikri b'shakel. We'll say sometimes, we spoke about this in Erev Shabbos. Sometimes, unfortunately, someone is running late on Erev Shabbos. Rachmana litzlan lo aleinu. Right? But it could happen that someone's running late on Erev Shabbos. They'd run into the store. They quickly want to pick something up. And the truth is, they're not paying attention to whether or not there's the tu'udat, whether or not there's the certification, or there's the stempel, ultimately again on the scales, or they're not paying attention to whether or not the government. So therefore the Gemara says over here, we're concerned that because sometimes someone may be in a rush, they may come to go ahead and rely on the merchant, even if the merchant is using faulty weights and measures. Therefore, again, we circle back to the same with Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. You can't maintain faulty weights and measures. That's it. Period. You live in a place where there is government certification, there are government inspections, there are, it doesn't make a difference. You can't maintain it in your house, even to the point that what? Even to the point that halacha l'maisa, even if you're using it as a bedpan. So you think once you're using it as a bedpan, you're not going to use it as anything else. Kamash malon, still even under those circumstances, bless you, can't maintain it in your house. Tanya amihachi, a brayso that supports, bless you, a brayso that supports this. Lo yisha adam mida chasera o yisera b'sof beso. Person should not maintain a faulty weights and measures in his house. Afilu hi avid shamei me raglayim. Even if he's using it as a bedpan. So the Gemara says, see from here that halacha l'maisa, even in a situation where, again, this price doesn't qualify it, right? It's not a din. It's not a din ultimately, again. It's not a din about other inspections, not inspections. Is there a tuda, not a tuda? Doesn't make any difference. Halacha l'maisa, you can't maintain it in your home. So this is also very reminiscent, by the way. The Gemara Masechtas Avodah Zarah has a similar concept. The Gemara talks about the idea, a little bit different, but just the interesting, same type of wording, which is that the Gemara talks about the people who don't have a chilik in olam haba. And amongst those individuals are the Mesachik Bukovia, the gambler. We've spoken about this Gemara many times. So the Gemara talks about this idea that the Mesachik Bukovia, the gambler, isn't even permitted to go ahead and maintain the dice in his home. Rather, what should he do with the dice? What should he do with it? He should go ahead and he should smash the dice. So Rabbi Soloveitchik talks about this in one of his Tshuva drashos, and he discusses this idea, why does the gambler have to go ahead and smash the dice? One of the ikra is that the gambler shouldn't gamble. Why does he have to smash it? Like, why can't he just put it in the break front and just look at the dice? So Soloveitchik says something so beautiful. He says, those dice represent, they're emblematic, or they're representative, they're paradigmatic of an inappropriate lifestyle. And Rabbi Soloveitchik writes about this idea that in the world of sin, there's two components to sin. There's chet, and there's derech chotim. There's the sin itself, and there's the pathway to sin. Sin never just occurs by itself. Sin is often the result of a whole lifestyle, of a whole bunch of decisions. So for the gambler, those dice represent his pathway to sin. Tshuva is not just about the cessation of sin. Tshuva is about identifying what are the things that led me to this mistake. What are the things that led me to this erroneous behavior? And then identify them and stop those. Stop that. The whole goal, if I really want to become a Baal Tshuva, if that's really what, and I will say this is the season, if I really want to be a Baal Tshuva, it's not just about stopping the sin. It's identifying the ingredients that led me, the steps, the lifestyle, the choices that led me to this moment of hate and cutting it off at the pass. So therefore, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, if the gambler wants to do tshuva, it's not enough to stop gambling. What does he have to do? He has to smash the dice. He has to smash the dice because those dice represent a lifestyle, represent decisions, represent steps that ultimately culminated in hate. And it's very reminiscent, it seems to be what the Gemara is saying over here as well, which is to have, if you want to be a proper businessman, if a person wants to be an honest businessman, it's not just enough not to cheat. You can't have the mechanism for cheating in your home as well. So in other words, you can't possess inappropriate weights and measures, because that means there's some element of sin that exists within your life, that exists within your home, that exists within your business. I'm not using it. I'm not using it. I got it, you're not using it. But it's there. But I'm using it as a bedpan. Got it. But it's there. So and this is so incredibly important because the truth is, so many times, right, when we don't fully actualize as Baalei Tshuva. I try so hard to become a Baal Tshuva, but I don't fully actualize. And we wonder why that is, but I'm trying to stop the sin. It's because we're going about it wrong. To become a true Baal Tshuva, it's not enough to stop to commit an Aveira. But a person has to identify all of the ingredients and all of the steps that led me to this point and try to head that off at the pass. If all I'm doing is addressing the actual behavior of sin, it's too late. It's too late. I have to nip it in the bud. I have to identify how did I get here and start doing that. That's what Chazal said. You want to be honest in business? Honest in business doesn't start when you get into the office. Honesty in business begins already when I'm in my house. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, therefore there can't be the inappropriate weights and measures in the home because that's already a pegam in my business practices. An incredible Gemara, Gemara for life. Let's go weiter. It says Gemara, Aval, Osu sot tarkov v'chatzi tarkov v'kav v'chatzi kav. So we'll say the Gemara says as follows. But what can you do? So in terms of creating proper weights and measures, the Gemara says these are the following units of measurement you can make: a sa'ah, a tarkov, a chatzi tarkov, kav, chatzi kav, v'rova. Rova is a quarter of a kav. V'tuman, v'chatzi tuman top of tzadik, v'ochla. And an ochla, v'kamihi ochla. How much is an ochla? Echad nichamisha berevia. Literally, again, 1/5 of a quarter. 1/5 of a quarter of a kav. So we'll say, so these are the measurements. So the Gemara pointed out these are the standardized measurements that they would use. Ubamidas halach huosa. So we'll say, what about in liquid? So these were all solid measurements. What about in liquid measurements? Second line, Tzadik Amud Aleph. Umidas halach huosehin, v'chatzihin, ushlishes hahin, urevias hahin, v'lug, v'chatzi lug, urevias, ushmines, v'achad mishmona b'shmines. So we'll say, so again, these are just all the different measurements. What kind of liquid measurements do you have? A hin. We'll say, if some of these sounds familiar, it's because they're from the base of Mikdash, we're going to see as well. You have a hin, a half a hin, a third of a hin, a quarter of a hin, a lug, a half a lug, a quarter of a lug, and 1/8 of an eighth of a lug also, and that's called the kortov. Okay, so there said these are all the standardized measurements. The Gemara said, "Avid nami kabayim," but why don't we also have a double kav, right? Why don't you have what we call a kabayim, double kav? To which the Gemara says, "Asi lachlufe bitarkov," because you could confuse that measure with the tarkov. They're very similar in amounts. So what do you see from here? Alma to inchi tilsa. So you see from Rabbi say that when it comes to weights and measures, people could be thrown off by a third of a unit. If that's the case, then you also shouldn't make a kav measurement. Why? Because that's also they're also within a third of each other, and you could come to confuse that with a half a tarkov. Rather, the reason ultimately we don't make a double kav measurement is da'asi lachlufe bechatzi tarkov. You may come to confuse it with a half a tarkov. Alma toy inshi riva. So you see from here that halacha l'maisa, a person not only can confuse up to a third of a difference, but even a quarter. If that's the case, Rabbi said, then you shouldn't make two measurements, one the half of tuman, chatzi tuman, and one the ochla. We'll say again, after we go through this entire list of measurements, the Gemara is just pointing out that some of these are very close to each other. So are we not concerned about confusing the measurements? Amra Papa, midos kitanos beki bohu inshi. When it comes to the smaller units, people are much more proficient. So I will say it sounds like most commerce happen with smaller weights. So because, remember again, I'll say also, when you live in a society without refrigeration, right, so people often are not buying mass quantities of items. So therefore, again, people are much more proficient with smaller weights, and therefore, again, there was less confusion. Shlishis hayin, ureviyas hayin, lo v'avid. So we'll say, what about the fact that you have two measurements, a third of a hin and a quarter of a hin? Ultimately, again, that we should, those seem to be so close to each other that are we not concerned about confusion? So this is very interesting. Kevan dahavu b'mikdash lo gazru b'hu rabbanon. Those were different. Why? Because we all say those are Beis HaMikdash measurements. So because they are Beis HaMikdash measurements, therefore again, we maintain them. I b'mikdash nami ligzar. What about in the Mikdash? Aren't we concerned in the Mikdash that ultimately, again, the Kohanim will get confused in the Mikdash? So we'll say this is great. Kohanim zrizenein. Kohanim don't get confused, right? Kohanim are zaris. Kohanim will say, it's fascinating, by the way, I just want to point out that Kohanim are often identified by two midos, right? What are the two midos Kohanim are identified by? Kohanim zrizin and Kohanim radzonim are angry, right? They have tempers. So we'll say, so I just want to point out how fascinating this is. Why are these the two midos of Kohanim? There's zaris, which means like alacritus, and radzonim, and have a temper. So we'll say, if you think about it, so zrizos and kas could be two sides of the same coin, right? So when someone is zaris, it means they're very on top of the details. Someone is zaris, they're very alacritus. Someone is zaris, they need things to run a certain way. Sometimes when a person needs things to run a certain way, and they don't run a certain way, what happens? Kas. They get angry. There's this very fine line between, and I will say, so I just want to point out, and first of all, just in general, how it is that we saw this in our last cycle when we went through Reb Tzadok. We actually saw this concept. We saw this concept that Reb Tzadok, we're going to get to it in Meretz Hashem tomorrow, we'll pick up Reb Tzadok. But we saw this concept that when it comes in the Olam HaMidos, there are energies. Kosh Baruch Hu gives us koach. There's no such thing as a good midah or a bad midah, because every midah is a manifestation of koach. Everything in life is a question of how you use your energy. So Kohanim, they have this incredible koach. So the shaila is, does the Kohen use his koach for zrizos, or does he use his koach for kas? Right? Does he use that energy to be alacritus, or does he use that energy ultimately, again, to be angry? It's the same koach. It's the same exact koach. It is just a question of how you go ahead and you use it. So we'll say, but understand, every koach is like this. Every energy that a person has could be used for good or could be used for bad. That's nature. So the entire avoda of life is taking the energy that you have and channeling it in the right way. Unchecked energy leads to destructive behavior. Channeled energy could go ahead and lead to the most incredible kedusha. So Kohanim, you leave it unchecked, ragzonos, that's anger. You check it and you channel it, ultimately leads to zrizos. Incredible. And it's the same thing I always say, that's why, again, what's tshuva? Because a lot of tshuva gemaras over here. What's tshuva? So I say tshuva is not simply the cessation of sin, or for that matter, again, the cessation of certain lifestyle elements that lead to sin. Tshuva is identifying that when I sin, there is certain energy that goes into that. That is good energy. The shaila just is how do I rechannel that energy into something positive? You see, the biggest problem that people have with tshuva is that people think to become a Baal tshuva, I have to become someone else. You actually don't have to become someone else. You should be you. You just have to become a rechanneled you. Every chait requires tremendous koach. The more I sin, the more koach I have. The bigger the sin, the more koach I have. You should give yourself a shkoyach, not for the commission of sin, but for the fact that you are a repository of tremendous koach. What's tshuva? Tshuva is taking that koach and rechanneling it towards something positive. Incredible. All right, Amar Shmuel. Let's go weiter. So we'll say very interesting Gemara over here. Ein mosifin ala midos yoser mishasos. So Shmuel says like this: you cannot add on to a measurement more than a sixth, and not on a coin more than a sixth. Now, what does that mean? Take a look at the Rashbam. So we'll say this is the Rashbam in the widest lines, 2 lines in. Very interesting. Ein mosifin ala midos. So listen to this case. Im bo'u anshi ha'ir lahosif al kol hamidos ben gedolos ben ketanos lefi cheshbon echad machar ad revius u'leshaber midos harishonos t'lo asid mitan eid magdilin kiyim shesus. Listen to this, what we'll say. So here's what Shmuel's describing. Imagine for a moment in Baltimore, we decided, you know what? We wanted to, as a standard, increase the measure. So let's say, whatever. For example, we decided that a kav is X. In Baltimore, we decided that we wanted a kav to be X plus Y. And again, as a community, we decided that we are increasing the measure of a kav. Or for that matter, again, in Baltimore, we decided that we want $1. $1 is worth X. Right? $1 is worth 100 pennies. We decided we wanted $1 to be worth 103 pennies. And again, as a community, we decided this. So remember, technically speaking, if everybody in a particular community does this, so it could work as long as everybody buys in. So Shmuel says that's fine as long as you don't increase the measure or the currency by more than a sixth. By more than a sixth. Yes, so the Gemara says, yes, mishsos. So what's the pshat? So what's the pshat? Let's finish up the Rashbam. He says, al yistaker yoser mishasos, good. Fine. So you can't decrease it. You can't decrease it more than a sixth. Go back to the Gemara. Yes, mishasos. V'amistaker al yistaker yoser mishasos. Now, here's what's interesting. We'll define what the statement means as well. And if you're making a profit, turning a profit, you should not turn a profit more than a sixth. Okay, we'll define that in just a moment. So you can't add on. So again, I will say, a community, this is not talking about an individual merchant, right? An individual merchant can't make that decision. But if the merchants collectively of a particular locale decide to go ahead and add on, they could add on, they could add on to the local measure as long as it's not more than a sixth. Now what's the reason? My taima. So I will say, if we are concerned with afkui tara, what's afkui tara? Look at the Rashbam. Afkui tara, shemevim tvua lekan, kishiru shosifu midos yokiru, umishenichnas hayoker mokirin yosim michtetos efes. So I will say, if we're concerned in general about raising prices, so maybe we're concerned again that if you start manipulating measurements or start manipulating currency amounts, you could throw everything off and potentially cause prices to go up. Shusus namilo. Then I will say, so then the truth is, there shouldn't be any measurement or currency manipulation. Leave it alone. In other words, even if you're doing it at a sixth or less, you'd have to be concerned about that. Ella mishum ona. So the Gemara says, rather, I'm going to say no, because we know that 1/6. Remember again, 1/6 is that magic number, right? Remember again, I say the halachos of ona. Say that what? Less a sixth or less is negligible and forgiven, right? A sixth itself again should really be returned, and more than a sixth ultimately again is negation worthy. In other words, as you could void a transaction. So they look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam says, "Ella lahachi in mosifin yosem mishusos mishum da'osu mecher tavi achshav ona ein shteim chosrin kishein mosifin el l'shusos." So we'll say, so the idea that Shmuel seems to be saying is like this: is if in a particular locale you want to do some measurement modifications or currency modifications, essentially you could do it up to the shir of ona. So up to 1/6, because 1/6 again in the marketplace is the amount that the marketplace will tolerate before transactions can be voided. Okay. So again, just understand what Shmuel is introducing us to. What Shmuel is introducing us to is this concept that if in a particular locale, everybody, now again, everybody never means everybody, but everybody means at least, I would imagine, got to be a sizable majority, agrees. We want to adjust the amount that constitutes a kav. We want to adjust the amount that constitutes $1. for argument's sake, currency. You can do it as long as you don't change it by more than a sixth, right? So a sixth and under, you're fine. You're fine. The Gemara says, 1 second. Now, again, so why up to a sixth? Because a sixth or more, that's going to be onah. So also, this is fascinating. The Gemara says, but 1 second. Vama Rava, kol davar sheva midiv shem mishkov sheminyan, afilu pachos mikadei onah chozer. So say, this is fascinating. So onah, the Gemara says, only applies in situations, or I should say, doesn't apply in situations of anything that is measured or counted. So this actually makes a lot of sense. When does onah apply? So we'll say like, onah applies, I'm buying a car. I'm buying a lawnmower, whatever it is. I'm buying a watch, whatever it is. So now, okay, so there are halachos concerning overcharging, right? Less than a sixth, more than a sixth. If I'm buying a bushel of apples, there's no concept of onah. Why is there no concept of onah? Why not? Because I will say onah is a bushel is, let's just call it a bushel is 25 apples. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's say bushel is 25 apples. So I will say anything that you weigh or you measure, that's exact. So if I buy a bushel of apples, again, there's a price for a bushel. There's a price per apple. There's no onah. There's no onah in those cases because that type of transaction is exact. Right? In other words, so if it's $1 an apple, and again, if there's one apple missing, one apple less, the laws of onah really only apply when you're purchasing an item for which there is some level of price fluctuation. The Gemara presupposes that anything that is sold in measurement or number has an exact value. Or at least, again, that was the marketplace in the time of the Gemara, which makes sense, right? A pound of apples is X amount of apples, right? Or a price per apple is X amount of dollars. So anything that is sold by weight, by measure, or by number is not subject to the laws of onah. So what's going on over here? So the Gemara says, "Afilu pachos michdei onah chozer ela telo lehavi psida letagra." Shabbos Arad, the Gemara says, now, so let's go back. So therefore, Shmuel is saying that halacha l'maisa, a town could decide to go ahead and increase the particular measure or decide to increase the amount of a currency up to a sixth. So what's going on over here? It can't be just for general produce transactions because those type of transactions are weighed or measured and those things aren't subject to onah. So what's going on over here? So rather the cap is that it shouldn't be a loss to the merchant. Take a look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam is out 10 lines after the bottom. Shebame ir acheres v'amran de mistake shesus u'b'shelo hosifu kim shesus v'hulo yada u'mocher. So we'll say this is very interesting. What are we concerned about? See, this is fine. So if we here in Baltimore decide that where we are increasing or decreasing the amount of a kav, or increasing or decreasing the amount of $1, that's fine. What's the problem? The problem is if a merchant comes out of town, right? So I'll say, so in general, remember again, merchants made their money how? Really made their money how? Volume. The markup was relatively low. So therefore, again, if somebody is coming in to sell stuff from out of town, and he doesn't necessarily know about our price or measurement calibration, so ultimately, again, we can only increase our amounts up to a sixth. That way, again, at least he's at a break-even point. In other words, we don't want out-of-town merchants to lose money. So because of that, again, we can only increase up to a sixth. That way, worst case scenario, the out-of-town merchant is not going to lose money. At most, he'll break even. Or at worst, he'll break even. I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, so we'll say, so that's very nice. So you're making sure that the out-of-town merchants don't lose money. But guess what? People are not in business to break even. People are in business to make money. So the problem just is out-of-town merchants are going to be at a disadvantage because they may come in, that's very nice that they're breaking even, but they're not making any money. Zabin v'zabin tagri. So do you think someone is called a merchant because he buys and sells stuff? Someone is called a merchant because he wants to make money. So the problem is if you change the amount, you change the measurements, you change the value, the currency valuations, so it's fine. You might be protecting someone against losing money, but they're certainly not making money. Amrav Chista, Shmuel Kra Ashkach V'darash. Shmuel found the pasuk and he darshened it. What's the pasuk? Vashakel esrim gera Esrim shkalim chamisha ve'esrim shkalim asara v'chamisha shekel hamana yelochem. So we'll say the Gemara over here is quoting the pasuk from Sefer Yecheskel. So, the Gemara says, Mana Masan V'arban. So fine. So take a look at the last Rashbam on Amadal before you turn. Esrim Shkalim, Chamisha V'esrim Shkalim, Asara V'chamisha Shekel, Shalosh Cheshbonos Halalu B'yachad. So we'll say these three calculations are all together as one. Hamani Yelochem, V'yesh Lomar D'yesh Makomos Shamana Chamisha Asar Slime. There are people where there are places where the mana is worth 15 slime. V'yesh Esrim Slime Asu, V'yesh Chamisha ve'esrim. So there are some places also it's interesting where the mana is 15 sela, where the mana is 20 sela, and where the mana is 25 sela. Lekach ne'emar shloshas hamana malalu hamana shal kodesh yelochem. So the pasuk is highlighting the idea that at different places currency has different values. Some places the mana is 15 sela, some places the mana is 20 sela, some places the mana is 25 sela. Now, Amud Beis. So the Gemara says, Mana Masai V'arbon. So look at the Rashbam, top Rashbam. Mana Masai V'arbon. B'tniya, V'chi hava amana shishim shkalim, dahainu Masan V'arbon dinar. But is the mana really 60 shekel, which ultimately again are 240 dinar? Shekel dala dinar, v'hakaimalad mana chaf heslaim, dahainu mea zuzi. So we'll say, so again, the pasuk goes on, and in this calculation of the pasuk, it sounds like what the pasuk is saying is, that a mana is 60 shkalim, which is 240 dinar. The problem the Gemara says is that's not true. The mana ultimately again is 25 slime, which is 100 zuzi. So the Gemara says, what do you see from here? Mana masan v'arban ela shmamina tlas shmamina. Rather than both say, what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa again, there are these currency fluctuations. So the idea over here that Shmuel is saying is, based on the math of the pasuk, what you see from here is that sometimes currency could be valued in different ways and different places, and therefore Shmuel says halacha l'maisa, you could choose to value currency in different ways and different locales, assuming that you have the buy-in of the local population. And what is true for currency is also going to be true for weights and measures. Now again, Shmuel caps it at the 1/6. Right? Why? In order to go ahead and avoid any potential loss for who? For outside merchants. Right? So again, it could very well be that outside merchants who are unaware of our local customs may go ahead and end up breaking even and not turning a profit, but at least they're not losing money. Okay. Shmamina amana shal kodesh kafel haya shmamina mosifin alamidos ve'in mosifin yoser mishasus u'shmamina shesusa milavar. So we'll say, so we learn three things from here. Number one, we learn that you are permitted to go ahead and add on to measurements. Number two, we learn that you're permitted to add on, but you can't add on more than a sixth. And number three, we learned about that when adding on the sixth, that is what's called milabar on the outside. But remember again, we had this ona'ah. Remember again, there are two different ways of calculating a sixth. So the way the Gemara essentially goes ahead and understands that milavar means, for example, I will say, if you take, as Rashi used the 25, so what's a sixth of 25 for argument's sake? So essentially you divide 25 ultimately again by 5, right? And you add on an extra fifth. In other words, you add on another fifth. So it's adding on another 5. That's considered to be the 6th. That's called milavar on the outside. Okay, beautiful. Good. So therefore again, and it seems to be halacha l'maisa that this is how the Gemara is paskening. That Shmuel and Rebbetzins, this is quite fascinating about the ability of a local community to change its valuations both for measurements as well as for currency. But again, the cap is going to be a 6. And interestingly enough, not really about ona'ah. Because remember, again, another important piece of information, we've seen this before, but it's interesting to reinforce it. Ona'ah doesn't apply to things that are measured, weighed, or counted, right? Because again, those items are exact, right? Those transactions are exact. And if there's something missing or something extra, even less than a 6, those entire transactions are voidable. Okay, fascinating. Let's go weiter. So Gemara says, Rav Papa bar Shmuel, Bosai Tzadik on base at 90b, 4 lines down. Rav Papa bar Shmuel, Takin Kaila bar Tlasa Kafizi. This is very interesting. So Rabbi says, so now along these same lines, Rav Papa introduced a new measure. introduced a new measure. So Rashi says, Rashi says, kaila is a midah, tlasa kafizi. So he introduced this new measure called the kaila. It's called the kaila, right? And it was ultimately, in his kaila, it was 3 kfizi. What's a kfizi? The Rashbam says, tes lugin de kfiza, hukav chaser lug, dahainu gimel lugin. Okay, so he went ahead and Rapapa. So I'll say, so in line, this is kind of building on what Shmuel said, right? So Shmuel said that in a particular locale, you have the ability to adjust weights and measures. Rapapa seemed to take this a step further, and Rapapa made a new unit of measurement called the kaila. And the kaila ultimately again was 3 kfizi. Amrulei, Vamar Shmuel in Mosifin Alamidos Yoser Mishasos. But they said to Rapapa, Shmuel says, so apparently again, I should clarify this. The kaila isn't a new measurement. Rav Papa essentially attached a new amount to the kaila measurement. Rav Papa's kaila was 3 kfizi. Okay? So they said to Rav Papa, 1 second. Vamar Shmuel in Mosif and Alamidos Yoser Mishsos. So ultimately again, they said Shmuel says you can adjust weights and measures, but only up to a 6. Apparently this new calibration, this new measurement is more than a 6. Rav Papa said, no. Ana kaila chadata takini. I'm introducing a brand new measurement. This is kaila chadata. It's a brand new measurement. So Papa, essentially, it's very interesting. So Papa was saying, Shmuel was saying, you can only adjust an already existing weight or measure by up to a 6. Rav Papa essentially says, I'm introducing a brand new entity. A brand new kaila. So we'll say, so fine. So Papa wanted to introduce a new weight. So the Shajah the Pumpadisa V'lo Kiblua. They sent this information about this new weight, this new kaila, to Pumpadisa, and then Pumpadisa, they rejected it. They said, no new weight, we're not accepting this new weight and measure. Look at the Rashbam for just a moment. It's the first white line. Ana kaila chadatam taknino, she'im ba'ir azos mida acheres, telehavit osefes, v'lo yavo lidei hefsit tagar, v'gam lo tos revia. So Papa essentially said, there's no weight like this one, and therefore I'm introducing something new. Fine, so they sent it to Pumpadisa, they didn't accept it. Shadre le Papunya, they went ahead and they sent it to Papunya, they kablua, they accepted it. V'karule, Rose Papa. Incredible. So we'll say, so they called, right? So it's interesting in the Agos V'tziyunim, they changed this to Don Papa. Okay, Rose Papa, Don Papa. Rose Papa sounds so nice, right? They changed it to, right? So now in Papanoi, they accepted it to Rose Papa. Okay, look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam says, third wide line in, Rose Papa Lashon Midahu Ba'os HaMalchus. So we'll say, so apparently Rose in Papanoi meant a measurement. So interestingly enough, in Papanoi, they accepted this as the measurement of Papa. Okay. Fine. So we'll say, skip the parentheses, another acronym for all the brises. Here you go. Tanabana. So we'll say, very, very incredible Gemaras over here. Otzrei Peros, so we'll say this is actually fascinating. It's really fascinating Gemaras. Now, Otzrei Peros also have people who gather produce. Now, what does this refer to? Take a look at the Rashbam. Fourth wide line in the Rashbam. Otzrei Peros, Shekonin b'shukla otzram limkar b'yoker v'garmin shemisyakar hashar v'ikahefsid aniyim. V'nira li deba'ir shrubi yisrael. Supposed to listen to this. Otzrei Peros also have people who buy up produce in order to create an artificial shortage, in order to jack up prices. So it's hoarding produce in order to drive up prices. I will say, now what's important to understand is who suffers the most under those circumstances, those market conditions? The poor. Right? The poor, because the poor who are maybe able to afford food at normal prices are not able to afford it at these artificially inflated prices. So the Gemara says, so that's Otzrei Peros. Malabe Beridis, people lend with interest. Umaktine Eifa, so we'll say Maktine Eifa are people who go ahead and have skewed measures. Eifa is a measurement. They diminish the amount, right? So Maktine Eifa. In other words, they cheat with measures. Maktine Eifa. Umafkie Sharim. So we'll say Mafkie Sharim are people, Rashbam says, Mosifin al Hashar, overcharge. So people who overcharge, so we'll say the common denominator over here. So again, Otzrei Peros, people who hoard produce in order to drive up prices. Malave beribis, people who lend with interest. Maktine efa, people who cheat with weights and measures. Mafkiya sharim, price manipulators. Drive up the price. All these people, aleim hakasuv omer, about such people the pasuk says, Leimar masay ya'avor hachadash v'nashbira shever v'ashev v'sevinita chabar lahaktin efa lahagdil shakel ula'avos ma'ozni mirma. So we'll say the pasuk refers to over here all of these people who engage in these terrible practices. And what does the pasuk say? V'ksiv nishpa Hashem b'gal Yaakov im ashkach lanetzach kol ma'aseyem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says essentially, I swear by the greatness of Yaakov that I will never forget forever all of their deleterious practices. So we'll say very strong, very strong. Right? So those who go ahead, and we'll say now, again, why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why such severe words for these practices? Because remember, at the end of the day, who are these people most negatively impacting? The poor. The poor. And the Ribono Shel Olam always has a special place in his divine heart for those who struggle, just like the Yasum, the Almana, the Ani. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will never forget the inappropriate practices of these individuals. So again, we're focused on three people. Otzrei Peros, those who hoard produce to drive up practices, to drive up prices, lending with interest, manipulating weights and measures, and manipulating prices. So Otzrei Peros, so let's listen to this, this is incredible. So now we're going to go through each of them. What's an example of people who hoard produce in order to drive up prices? So the Gemara says, Kigon man, Rabbi Yochanan Kigon Shabsi Otzer Peros. Wow. So we'll say, so like who? Like the guy Shabsi Otzer Peros. So we'll say, can you imagine? Right? He's like, I was just trying to get ahead in business, right? I was just trying to make a buck. We'll say, isn't it incredible that, saying, we're all going to be remembered for something in this world. Make sure you're remembered for the right thing. Right? Shabsi, I'm sure, was a guy who had a lot of milas. Every yid has a lot of milas, right? Every yid has a lot of good stuff. But I always say, but imagine, Shabsi is forever memorialized and forever remembered on Bava Basra, the Tzadik on the days, as the guy who hoarded produce in order to artificially inflate prices. Look at the Rashbam. Kigon Shabsi Otzer Peros, Kadei Limkor La'aniyim Biyoker, Aval Kigon Da Otzer Peri B'Shas Hazol, Umochrim B'Zol La'aniyim B'Shas Hayoker. Come on. Now we'll say, we are going to see, by the way, that there are certain circumstances where you are permitted to go ahead and gather up produce. We'll discuss that. But the chap of this guy Shabsi, the Gemara says, is his sole goal. Where was he trying to turn a profit? He was definitely trying to turn a profit on the poor. In other words, he hoarded produce up to drive up the price, and then he could sell to everyone, including the poor, at an elevated price. Incredible. Avud, so what's it? The Gemara tells listen to this. Avud is Shmuel, Shmuel's father. Mazbin luhu leperi b'tara charfa kitara charfa. So we'll say, interesting. The father of Shmuel, what he would do is he would go ahead and he would sell produce at early prices, right, throughout all of the sales season. And I will say now, interesting, if you look at the Rashbam says, B'tara charfa, b'shara muktam, tenu b'shas hagoren, ki charfa b'zol kedeshim kuru gama kol, v'izdalzel hashar kol hashana. So we'll say, listen to this. So the father of Shmuel, now I will say, so apparently the way it works is like this. In the beginning of the harvest season, right, so produce is generally less expensive. Why? Because there's more supply. As you get further from the harvest season, there's less supply, right, same amount of demand, and therefore, again, prices go up. The father of Shmuel made sure that whenever he sold his produce, he always sold his produce at early prices. Tar churfa, right, tar churfa means the price set at the beginning of the season, which was the cheaper price. So the father of Shmuel was always makbid to go ahead. It didn't matter when in the season it was, he always sold specifically to the poor at the early price. So always made sure that they had access to food at the earlier prices. Listen to this. Shmuel Berei, now Shmuel, his son, Mashi Leperi, Umaz bin Luhu Betara Afla Kitara Charfa. So Shmuel, the son, what he would do is, so this is very interesting. So Shmuel, look at the Rashbam. Shmuel, Ma'atzu Leperi Shal Sadalsa, Umaz bin Luhu Betara Afla Ke'es Hayoger, Kitara Charfa, B'Shas Hazo, Umiu, Minashuk, Hava Ma'atze, B'Shas Hagor, and the Mikomoko Mokir Ashar Ktsas, the Yatzas Chab Efsedo. So let's listen to this. Shmuel did a different practice. What Shmuel did is, Shmuel held his produce. So Shmuel would not, so I'm going to say Shmuel hoarded his produce. In other words, he kept the produce, he did not release it into the market to the beginning of the season. Now, why did he do that? So that later on in the season, when supply was diminished, he would then put his produce onto the market, but he would sell it for the earlier cheaper price. So essentially, both father and son were doing the same thing. They were making sure that the poor had access to food at early season cheaper prices. But interestingly enough, they did it in different ways. Shmuel's father, Avua de Shmuel, released his produce into the market from the beginning and made sure to always sell his produce at the lower market value, even later on in the season. Shmuel hoarded his produce, he kept it, only released it later in the season when ultimately, again, when there was less supply, and therefore ensured a supply to the poor even at the early season prices. So the Gemara says, Shalchu mitam. So we'll say, who had the better practice? Shalchu mitam. It said from Eretz Yisroel, Tavad da'aba midabra. What Shmuel's father did was better than what Shmuel did. Why? My taima, Tara de rabach. So we'll say, here's what happened. The Rashbam pointed this out. Shmuel's practice, as beautiful as it was, it inadvertently led to a rise in price. Why? Because Shmuel had a lot of produce. The fact that Shmuel did not release it into the market immediately meant there was a little bit less supply initially. Therefore, it did drive up prices a little bit. So everyone else was impacted. What Avua de Shmuel de Rabosai is, by flooding the market with his produce at the beginning and setting the price, essentially the Gemara says the way it works is, once the price is set at the beginning of the season, that creates the baseline. And by creating the baseline, he ensured for lower prices throughout the entire season. So therefore, again, the Gemara says what Shmuel's father, again, both obviously had the most beautiful of kavanos, but what Shmuel's father did is Shmuel inadvertently caused a little bit of a bump in the price in the market because he held his produce back. Shmuel's father kept prices low for everyone throughout the entire season, and therefore his practice was more praiseworthy. Beautiful. Amarav, supposed to listen to this. Osa Adam es Kaba Otsar. So we'll say, now Rav comes along and says, now by the way, a person, so essentially, you can't hoard produce. Why can't you hoard produce? Because if you do so, you end up going ahead and driving up marketplace prices. This comes along Rav, and Rav says, but you can hoard. The word hoard sounds so terrible. I don't mean like that. It's you can gather. In other words, that you can keep your own produce. You don't have to release it into the marketplace. So you can go ahead and gather your own produce. In other words, if I have a field and I choose not to release my produce into the market, I can do that. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Actually, no, not yet. So the Amrav, Adon as Kaba Otzar. Tanya, the Chabrai that support this. Ein Otzrim Peiros Dvarim Sheish Ben Chaye Nefesh. So I'll say in general, you can't hoard produce. Dafka with things that people depend on, like life staples. What are examples of life staples? Kigon, Yenos, wine. It's interesting, right? Yenos will say, so again, especially if it's a hard day. Right? So I'll say Kigon, Yenos, Shmanin, oil, Vislasos, flour. So we'll say these are considered to be staples. Aval tavlin, when it comes to spices, kamon, cumin, papal, and peppers, mutter. That's mutter. That's what the Lord will say. So in other words, you can't hoard staples because then that makes it difficult for everyone else. But you can hoard spices because again, spices are more expensive. We'll say, what do you do if spices get too expensive? What do you do? You don't buy it. Right? In other words, those are things you can live without. When is this so? This is all talking about in the marketplace, about the machnis mishalom mutter. Or as we'll say, we're talking over here, when we say not hoarding, that's talking about commercial items. What you do with your own, vegetable garden, you have your own field, and you don't want to, you want to keep that for yourself. You don't want to release it into the market. That's your business, right? In other words, that's your own business. You could do that. That's mutter. Furthermore, u'mutter li adam la'otzer peiros be'eretz Yisrael gimel shanim. Furthermore, if you live in Eretz Yisrael, there's another time where you are permitted to go ahead and keep produce for yourself. Hoard it. When are you allowed to hoard it? Right? Erev Shvius, u'matzei Shvius. Right? The most is incredible. You're 6, you're 7, and you're 8. So remember again, I will say, that's the Shemitah cycle. And in the Shemitah cycle, halacha l'maisa again, everybody's entitled to ensure that they have enough to eat. So therefore, you're allowed to keep your produce for yourself those 3 years. Ubisheni b'suras, Rabbi said, listen to this. Now, in the years of famine, this is incredible. Afilu kav charuvin lo yatzar. Even a kav of carobs, you should not hoard. Why? So Rabbi said, this is incredible. In years of famine, the market is incredibly sensitive, right? So it's sensitive to any perceived shortages. So therefore, again, when it comes to years of famine, even carobs, right, you shouldn't go ahead and withhold for yourself. Why? Because if people even sense that there's a shortage, even of carobs, ultimately it'll cause the market to go crazy. I'm going to lay Rav Yossi Bachani Lepuga Shamei Pok Atzoli Peri Shalosh Shamim Erev Shvius Ushvius Umatzi Shvius. And in fact, again, Rav Yossi Bachani said to Puga, his shamis, go out and gather, right? Gather for us produce in years 6, 7, and 8. So we'll stop over here for today, but just understand. So again, as much as halacha l'maisa, one is not permitted to hoard produce, lest it go ahead and drive up the pricing. Halacha l'maisa, we see that there are certain exceptions to that. We are allowed to watch out for your own needs. The halacha l'maisa, and how this actually plays out societally. We'll say incredible Gemara tomorrow. Shkoyach.